Good evening to you and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Leon Abrams, and my guest this evening again is Brother Tacuma Ogunseye, and together we'll be talking about current affairs locally and internationally. I want to welcome you to the program, Brother Tacuma.
It's always a pleasure to be here, and since this is our first program for the new year, want to say to the viewers, Happy New Year.
Yeah. All right, so uh, the new year has begun. Um, I too want to wish all the viewers out there, I don't know, a happy new year, but going forward, I'm hopeful that we are going to see some changes that are basically for the good of the people and for the good of the country, because over the past 6 months or so, a lot of things have been happening that we cannot say basically are right, and that a lot of people have suffered from the actions of the new administration, and we're hopeful that going forward that things are going to change and that all Guyanese are treated equal in whatever regards, whatever respect. But we've noticed last week we spoke about a change in the modus operandi of the police force. We know that there has been a lot of reshuffling in the force. A lot of the old agents of the PPP era were put into positions again, and some of them would have had a reputation for doing things that were basically not right for the citizens, and not basically, in essence, not good for the image of the force during that time. But we've seen a number of incidents recently that these incidents are telling us that somehow our police force is going down a path that again suggests that they are in confrontation with the citizenry. The most recent incident would have been on the television, well, on Facebook and the social media, in which a police officer was stamping an alleged criminal in the head. Well, what are your thoughts about what has transpired?
As you said on the earlier program, we did lament the worrying signs that we have been seeing in the police force. The attitude towards citizens seems to be trigger happy again. You know, the shooting at protesters, the shooting at this body, the pellets and so. In this specific case, you know, we in Guyana, when the American incident, you know, occurred, when the white officer was put his knee on an African American that
George
subsequently
Floyd.
led to his death, George Floyd. We in Guyana, like many people around the world, find it very disgusting and we condemn it. And I think that we in Guyana have to face some realities. We have to, and I'm speaking as an African person, and I'm speaking, okay, as an African political activist. We also have to condemn even a more stronger way African police brutality of Africans or brutality of any citizen. We know for a fact that the PPP's politics encourage that. They encourage the police to target, you know, citizens in a certain way. And in terms of the history of dealing with crime in the city, and I'm talking about in city, the historical approach to crime is to encourage the police with great excesses, because in the majority of cases, the police will be coming into counter with African Guyanese youths. Okay? And we saw that this approach led to unprecedented situation in 2002, 2005. And the PPP seems not to have learned. You have to put the police, under manners, to use a layperson term. You can't allow them to get out of hand. But one get the sense that under Ben's leadership, the police seems to believe that they have a license to return to the old behavior. And I have been following, police behavior since I'm a youth in Christchurch Secondary School. I remember a number of us when the police shot a young man, chap named Caesar, his next name I can't remember, in Tiger Bay. That led to a ferment. From those very early days in the 70s, right up, I've been carefully following police behavior in this country. And I will make no apology with saying that the history of African police behavior, okay, over the years is totally unacceptable. African police are really the butchers of the police forces. They do the most vicious things. If you were to make an objective analysis of the amount of times Indian policemen engage in brutality and excesses as against African police, the majority of cases will be African police. People will argue because the numbers are greater, but not simply because the numbers are greater. It's the attitude. The attitude, and that is why I have for some time have been rethinking. And I don't think, that the African presence in these coercive areas of the state as a community is in our best interest. Because what it does, it allows your oppressors, the PPP, to use African police or security forces against African people. And therefore, it creates antagonism in the African community. African police excesses when Indian citizens, American citizens watch the excesses of the African police, it leads to a conception of the African personality that is not in our best interest as an African community. So, and we have been asked to play this role, okay, for numerous years. And I think we reach a point where we have to reassess whether it should be business as usual. And I will argue that the African, community will have to begin to re-examine these things, and we will have to begin to retreat from some of those areas. Allow Indians and Amerindians to engage in those activities. I think we carry that burden, probably from slavery, post-slavery period, right to now. And I think it's a burden that is not in our best interest. So we have to, in my view, we have to fight police brutality as a community, as an African community. We have to fight police brutality as a nation. And we have to insist for higher standards among police officers. And I'm worried, because if you can insist for higher standards among police officers at the level of the lower area of the problem, then you're not going to insist at the more, complex and complicated areas. If a system can say to policemen, 3 policemen trained to engage in arrest, you can arrest the average citizen, because the particular young chap is an average citizen. He's not 7 feet tall, 400 pounds, and 3 police officers trained can't, civilizedly, in a civilized way, arrest a citizen. It really leaves a lot to be worried about the Ghanaian police force and where we're going.
So you're making the point that they couldn't arrest an average citizen.
The excuse they're using is that they were self-defense.
Right, okay. So how plausible is that in relation to
that's nonsense, man. I doesn't
resisting
doubt.
arrest?
Look, I doesn't doubt I insist. I doubt that the person may resist arrest. Okay? I doubt that the person may have fired some punches in the direction of police officers, but that's part of the work. It's like a doctor or a nurse going to give a person an injection in the eye, and if a person decided to jump and knock the doctor hand away. That's part of the business. You know, part of the work, there's some of the hazard conditions of the work. But professionalism requires, based upon your training, that there's some bottom line. You can't be kicking a man on the ground who is in a helpless position, okay, with your police boots in the head, okay, a number of times, and your fellow officers watching on and doing nothing about it, and telling me that this is acceptable police conduct. I refuse to accept that. I won't accept it from white people, and I won't accept it from black people.
So this perception that you talk about, over the years, you're talking about the history of police conduct. There was a period in our country where a policeman that killed was a notorious cop, was somehow seen as the kind of cop that you should be. And you had a lot of names that went around: Toots, Golden Gun, Coffee,
Fraser,
these guys who killed citizens. And in discussing this issue with some people who were aligned to the police force, there was a rationale behind some of the killings that they carried out. And one of the things they said was that you have to get rid of some of these elements, criminal elements, from the society. Particularly when you remember they had to kick down the door, and because many of them became killers in themselves, and so they needed to remove them from society. Is that a good approach to policing?
I mean, that's backward policing. That's uncivilized behavior, police behavior. Firstly, the police is taking on their own that they have to be the judge and the jury and the executioners. So they're violating the very fundamental constitutional basis of the country and the law. The police work is to apprehend people, not to decide to execute them. So any police officer who give the police the right to execute people, okay, on whatever excuse you want to sing, it's flying in the face to the law. There has to be, we know that police work expose police to danger. And there are hazards in the police execution of the duty, but there's a clear civilized procedure, okay? And there's clear standing orders that determine between criminal behavior and legitimate behavior. And people you got a police officer who got a record of killing 12, 15 people. And when they drink in the pub and say they boasting how much people they kill. Now there's a psychopath. Any police officer who engage in multiple killings of people, okay, is a psychopath, need to be taken out of the force and need to be given psychiatric treatment. If not charged and find himself in the prison. So no police officer of any reputable standing could come to me and argue that is the best way of dealing with things. You have to deal with crime in a holistic way. Every part of the civilized world know. I mean, I'm talking, and there's petty crime. And even if you go to the kick down the door crime, you have to deal with crime in a way that takes into consideration the social and economic consequences that leads to criminal activity. I said it before. I had an experience with a Brazilian person. And the Brazilian man said, Guyana got nice criminals. So we want to know how it is. He said, in Brazil, they shoot you and kill you, then they rob you, take away your thing and your money. And he said, in Guyana, the criminals don't kill nobody. So he said, in Brazil, they shoot you. The criminals shoot you, then rob you. So he said, Guyana got nice criminal thief men. Now, we have to ask ourselves, and this is a matter I have dealt with for years. And I have seen it. There was a time in this country, okay, in the colonial days, even a police discharge a firearm, it was a once and off kind of thing. And the amount of statement he got to write, okay, to justify the use of Her Majesty ammunition, that most police officers never used to want to do that. And the procedure was clear. If you're going to shoot in public, you got to shoot up in the air for alert people. And then you got to go up on your knees. And you got to aim your revolver below the hip of the person you're shooting. And if by chance you hip shoot the man in the back, you're in trouble. And there's cases where police officers in the colonial days sent to jail for that kind of behavior. And I remember on the Burnham period, the PNC period, Burnham period, we were students in Christchurch School. And I remember in our class we had a debate. Because what the major crime that time was pickpocket.
Okay.
Pickpocket. Them boys used to go around, push your hand in your pocket and snatch and run. Okay? And that was a great concern in the society. And the way the government at the time decided to deal with it is by arming the police. Because in the colonial time, the police would walk with the police a button. They armed the police. And it didn't stop the thing. In fact, it led to more police shooting and thing. You know? So, you have to be careful that, you know, that you don't get sentimental on these matters. One of the things that any citizen got to be concerned when you're dealing with a criminal situation is that the criminal will come in your house. The police are coming after. Very rare the police is up on the spot to protect you. And the last thing we want is people robbing you, shooting you and kill you first, then rob you. And if the police develop a culture of brutalizing and shooting criminals and so on the willy-nilly conditions, and we have seen it, you know, in a civilized world, if the police turn up and the criminal comes to the person's house, and the police say hands up, and the criminal put his hand up, you're supposed to shoot him. But if you say, well, don't worry, they're shooting, eventually the criminal is going to say, look, I can dead anyhow. Therefore, they're going to shoot the victims and kill the victims. So the citizen will be in a worse position, okay, than they were before. So these things lead to consequences that, you know, any civilized society wishes to avoid. And, you know, we have to learn from our past, because we walk through all of those things I tell you, is experiences we experience in Guyana. Yeah.
All right, so, all right. Well, when we spoke about the brutality last time around, we were looking at the Henry situation. Yeah. And we had called for a dropping of those charges against, has there been any change in our position?
Not in our position. And I think we have to reiterate the call and keep the call on the groundings until the charges actually are dropped, you know. So we have to keep our eyes on it, you know. I noticed in the news, I think it's today's paper or yesterday's paper, there was an article saying the FBI now is involved in the Henry investigation. I mean, the more the merrier. You know, what is important is to us to have outcomes, you know. So I'm glad to hear at least another foreign agency is being recruited by the government to get to the bottom of this matter. And we got to keep pressing this matter. We got to politically whitewash the government on this matter to make sure that we get to the bottom of it. Because it is important to understand what is happening in our society. And the nature of those crimes, you know, is something we really want to know. What is driving it? You know, we don't want to act simply on speculation. We really want to get on the bottom of it, know the truth we're driving it.
But I noticed that there was an arrest made of a young man who said he was part of the party that helped search for the guys, and that he was a friend of the father of one of the victims. Well, he was arrested and placed, brought from Berbice and placed in the lockups in Georgetown. And he's questioning the motive behind that arrest. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't notice it. Okay.
Yeah,
the
guy lives at Rosignol.
Okay.
But he was
so a lot of strange things seems to be merging around the matter, you know.
Yeah. Unless they're trying to somehow make it appear, you know, because a lot of the action seemed to, because initially you remember there was this racial overtone in relation to the killing, and so we hope that they're not trying to, in their attempt to remove that.
As I said before, I've heard from inside PP source, they're trying to twist it to be a drug-related or gang-related
Or that it's not a
it's not really racial
race
or
and
political,
yeah.
you know. That's their line of march, you know.
So if the police really didn't have any concrete evidence or reason for arresting this guy, then you know
It's worrying.
it's something that we
Yeah.
should worry about. The Venezuelans, Maduro has set up some committee. I read the thing,
Yeah,
but
he passed a decree
yeah, that
reiterating Venezuela claim to
to
the
Escobar
Essequibo and the sea space around the
related.
area, and you know, and the bottom of the sea.
And then he's asking for the UN to revert to the dialogue between Guyana and Venezuela.
Yeah.
What this dialogue that he's talking about?
But we remember when Guyana was about to get independence, okay, and at that time it was felt by the Americans in particular that the PPP was likely to win elections, and therefore the PPP may be the party that is carrying the country into independence. The Americans get onto the Venezuelans and to encourage them to, you know, restate the claim to Essequibo as a way of putting pressure on Guyana. And you remember the Venezuelans invade Ancoco, you know, very close to independence, coming if the night before or the night, but very close to independence. And Ancoco, the half Ancoco, the our half of the island, because the island was divided into both, you know, now the Venezuelan half and Guyana half. And they sent their troops and they took over the whole island. And up to now, they haven't withdrawn. We have never got that matter we addressed at all. So, and we know that the Venezuelans have been constantly engaging all kinds of acts of aggression in order to put in the claim. And this new initiative by Maduro, you know, we have to take it very seriously, you know. And what it raises for me, you know, we can't control other people's behavior, but at least we can control our own behavior. And on the question of the border and the sovereignty of the country, any sensible nation would want total solidarity among the people at all levels, among the political parties, among the social and civic groups. You would like to have, you know, total unity, you know, in defense of the territorial integrity of the country. But we have to be careful that you know, unity is not something that comes automatic, you know. And remember, in these endeavors, the other side is always be watching and assessing the situation in the world, assessing, you know, the situation in a particular country, the neighboring country where they got the problems, and to try to weigh, you know, the chances of advancing their cause. And one of the things, you know, that always worry me is the question of unity. Ghana is a small country in terms of population, okay, relative to Venezuela. We really don't have the capacity, in my view, for any substantial military action against Venezuela. We have to depend upon international, you know, solidarity, and you know, in order to deal with this matter. But at the same time, every country has to have a certain level of unity and commitment to defend this territorial integrity if you're to benefit from the solidarity of other countries. So even though you might be a small country, even though you might be a weak country, military relative to the other side, you still have the duty to unite your country and to build a resolve that if there is aggression, Guyanese are united and we put our lives on the line to push back the aggressors, and to give time for the international forces, you know, play a role, you know. And I'm always been worried that our political leaders, sometimes behaves like though we don't have a significant border threat. And they don't, to me, to my mind, it carries you back to the election crisis. I mean, we have spoke about this over and over. I don't think anybody in Guyana in the rightful mind would want an electoral crisis like we had in 2020. But the fact that you had the crisis is a reality. The fact that you have the crisis is a reality that it fractured the nation. And the Venezuelans are watching. They know that at this point Guyana is a fractured nation. And they're looking at all the threats and the intimidation coming from the government to the opposition. And they know that a lot of the opposition troop, the security forces in Guyana is African people, and they're more aligned with the coalition, the PNC. And Maduro and all them are reading this situation and trying to interpret it. And they know that the chances of a united and a cohesive, opposition to them is very questionable. And some of it is our own doing. We have to learn to fight for principles, but we have to learn not to go overboard to the point that we create conditions where your adversaries feel that you're in a weak position and they can take full advantage of you. You see? And I am not of the person who believe, even though I argue and I will continue to argue that in the military terms, Guyana can't stand against Venezuela. But I think that any nation, regardless of your condition, has the right, if you face aggression, you have to demonstrate that you have enough cohesion and love for country that you're prepared to put your life down in defense of your country. If you're not prepared to do that, then it doesn't work international solidarity. You see? So you always have to fight to maintain the capacity of your country, and the cohesion of your country, that if challenge come, we will stand united and pay whatever is the initial price we have to pay in order to create the conditions that other people will feel you worthy of coming to defend.
But one of the things of concern to me is the refusal to accept the ICJ's ruling in relation to their ability or their right to hear the case. And because, of course, that was the first determination whether the ICJ can hear the case in relation to the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy. And Maduro is saying that he's not accepting the decision of the ICJ, that they can look into the matter, that he wants the thing to go back to the whole agreement. They're part of the UN, they signed the convention. Can they actually refuse to accept?
Yes, they could refuse to accept, but that doesn't. It does not mean that the refusal is not legal or moral. But they could refuse to accept, and they have refused to accept. Venezuelan attitude is very clear. They're being bullies. They know that they're the stronger nation, okay, and they're just trying to bully Guyana. They're being bullies. Maduro is being bullied, and I think that part of Maduro thing too. One of the things about Venezuela and the border thing, they have been able to develop a national consensus that Essequibo belongs to Venezuela, and they have developed a national consensus that Essequibo must be returned to Venezuela at some point along the line. And they teach that to the children in school. They got maps of Venezuela showing Essequibo as part of Guyana. And we have objected to it. Part of Venezuela. And we have objected to it, and so it doesn't matter. In Venezuela, there seems to be across the political spectrum, okay, unity on this false territorial claim, So, but I think that Maduro too is also trying to use it as a distraction, in its domestic situation. Venezuela is going through, a serious economic crisis. And since one of the things that build national solidarity is the border, is the border. So I think one of his motivation too is that. And two, he also watch what have been happening in America and decided that, to flex your muscles to get attention. But we have to treat those things as serious. And my concern is that in a small country, if you're going to stand up to a potentially large country, you got to get unity. If you don't get unity, then there's no way. And this country since has been fractured for a long time, and the election crisis of 2020 are further fractures.
So would you say, I mean, Minister Greenwich would have been retained as part of the team by the current administration that was dealing with the issue at the International Court of Justice. Would you call that an attempt at unity, or?
No, well, I would say it is a good move. It's one of the few things you got to commend the PVP government from doing, because you need continuity. Okay, the team of persons, your legal team and your diplomatic team that was dealing with the matter, okay, even though they start dealing with it under the previous administration, this border issue is so important that you need continuity. And I think that the decision to retain Greenwich was a good move,
Yeah,
on that particular issue of the border.
Well, we should know that it's a continuation of the approach that was applied by the APNU
Yeah.
in relation to the issue, because the PPP was never left out of and they also accompanied the team
Yeah.
in the form of Gail Shearer when they went to the ICJ. So, I mean, some things are good in terms of our outlook. The Venezuela issue is seen and should continue to be seen as something that really should not divide us politically. And we should broaden that to, every area of life.
You see, I think we have, this is some Burnham time and Chetty time. Despite all the domestic, tangling and thing, and talk about and rig elections and all the problems that we know, both gentlemen and both parties have always been committed to the defense of the territorial integrity of the country and sovereignty of the country. And I think we have been able, despite all of the problems we have had up to now, we have been able politically to keep that that commitment, or that semblance of unity, but it was never tested. You see, it's easy to keep unity at the level of rhetoric, but your real test for your unity is when you got to send your supporters and your citizens to defend the territorial integrity of the country. Then you know if you really got unity.
Okay, well, we hope that we don't have that test. There is no need for that. It doesn't arise at all.
But if you talk about nation building, nation states, you have to develop that capacity.
You talk about what is happening in Capitol Hill, in the United States, and Maduro's somehow feeling that he can flex his muscles at this time. The situation in the United States, the world is watching. What is your perception of what has taken place there, the storming of the...
There's a lot. We got to take it in different chunks. The Americans, Trump on had made it very clear his attitude to the US elections. And I remember right on this program when Ambassador Lynch was pulling the APMU AFC coalition, across the fire, the coals, telling us about the glorious democracy of America and so, and urging us to do the right, correct thing. I read she Twitter after the storming of Capitol. And Ambassador Lynch come over like a tame lamb. All she could do is retreat, okay, in the conviction that the American institutions, democratic institutions are strong and they will recover. But she sounded like a tame lamb, you know. And I probably want to read from an observation made by our own David Hines, because I think it captures, you know, to some great extent, you know, the present crisis in America. And Hines wrote, he said, what Trump has done in the last 4 years is to expose to the world the dysfunctionality of the American political system and culture. He has exposed the myth of American political exceptionalism. I think it's a very profound observation. Very profound observation. You know, the Americans, you know, always boast that their democracy is a model democracy for the world. Trying to create the way it's flawless. You know, but you and I know, and you see, and I'm very frank on these matters. When the American struck the first blow to democracy, and the founding fathers published the Constitution, and they said all men are equal, they had African slaves. It didn't apply to us. The equality didn't apply to Africans. We weren't seen as people. So the American democracy was birthed in a grave historical injustice. It was not as perfect as they're trying to make it. Now, this is not to say that in the evolution of democracy, you know, at the global level, and even America itself, that the Americans haven't contributed, you know, to progressive aspects of human rights and democracy. But to try to tell the world that the experience was developed over 200 years, okay, has been perfect, and it is the ideal model for all of the world, and that they got some God-given right to impose these democratic norms on the rest of the world, you know, it's something that, you know, have been questioned and will continue to be questioned. And I think that the crisis that the world have seen on this is the 6th, I think it was the 6th of January, you know, really brings to the attention of the Americans themselves and to the world that America is no different from any other country. In fact, they look, you know, Trump makes them look like a third world country. You know, when but there's a deeper side of this matter. One, it is the condemnation of Trump and his Republican allies that facilitated the behavior. You know, is almost straightforward. You see it, but there must be some deeper issues that is happening in the American society that will make a Trump possible, and Trumpism, however they call it, you know, possible. And I think that for me as a person, as a human being in the world, while I will condemn Trump and I will condemn political excesses, I'm more concerned what is happening in American society that made this possible. It can't be just one man get up from nowhere and suddenly decide he gonna rock the system in such a profound way. And if you watch the police in the Capitol, I watch the behavior when you compare it with the Black Lives Matter. They allowed those people to reach the Capitol Hill, which meant that what was involved there is some deeper contradictions. And one to understand and to appreciate that manifestation, I think we have to deep down into what is happening in America. And I think it is tied up to American decline as an economic power and possibly a global power. The rise of China, the rise of India as industrial, emerging industrial powers. The fact that America now can't, as easy as it could, transfer its economic burden. It can't exploit the rest of the world in the same way to create wealth that transfer to the American citizens, okay, to deal with the social, economic things, is creating social and political pressures, which is influencing American politics, which has in fact influenced the American politics to what it is today. I think the destruction of the American middle class in previous recessions and so, when it impact the working class, you could put the working class under more pressure to compensate the middle class. When the economy reached a point where it already got the working class at the bottom of the scale, it has squeezed everything out of the American workers. They could probably squeeze. The crisis reached a point where it is destroying the American middle class, and it means that society, has some profound challenges, and I think it's the reflection of those things that is creating the political atmosphere for the Trump-like and the white racist elements to try to reclaim America for white people, and so forth and so forth. It is the economic deficiencies and the shrink in the economic in the economy in America is pushing those things. And I make the point that even if you don't have a Trump, you got to somebody else if you don't address those conditions. The big question is to work what are they going to do with Trump, or how they're going to deal with Trump. And I think that is worth discussing. I don't know. And in fact, I don't like to spend too much time on other people's business, because at the end of the day, it's the Americans got to decide what they're going to do with Trump. But I think there might be general consensus that Trump needs to be sanctioned in some form or the other. I think you probably get a tremendous unity in America society on that.
Right.
Among the political among the political elite, who have to make these decisions, I think that they will be weighing, okay, whether it makes sense to go after Trump and make him a martyr and force the Republican Party to come to his defense, and to come to their own defense, create more instability in America. I think, those are some of the things behind the scenes they will be weighing. I read somewhere on the web that the Democratic leader of the House said that, okay, they will start the impeachment process, but they're not going to pursue it until 100 days after Biden take power, because they're sensing that to push it now will create interruption and foment problems. I make that to point out that even though America is a world power, white people have a way of dealing with the problems the way we non-white people don't sometimes deal with problems. And they will look at the Trump phenomenon. And the pressures that they put upon Trump is to make sure that he behaves properly between now and the next 12 days. That you don't do nothing, you don't do another outrageous matter. But once Trump deliver, and you don't do nothing outrageous in the next 12 days, they're going to deal with Trump in a way that is much different to what it looked today. Because they're going to watch at their fundamental economic and political interests at a global level. And they will probably say the quicker we dump Trump into the history, the barrel of history, is the better for you. So I am of the view. I mean, I'm not a god, but I think that once Trump doesn't do anything extraordinary between now and his exit, the American political leadership and infrastructure will, I don't want to say forgive Trump's crimes, but they will probably feel it doesn't worth it, and unity the country and quickly putting this thing past America so the world forget about this low stage that America went. The quicker the better. And I will argue that as the thing unfolds, you will see how white people deal with the problem.
Yeah, but one of the things you mentioned, that they allowed that to happen because I was reading that several high-ranking officials, including the governor of Georgia or somewhere, had made calls to the Secretary of Defense and top-ranking officials of the Pentagon to have the National Guard sent to prevent exactly what transpired, and their requests were refused on several occasions. So the National Guard never really came out to prevent that situation from occurring. So it does appear that there was the intention to have what transpired there.
No, I think the Trump people were very convinced that they want to make a historical statement, you know, and they want what to happen, and they ensure that it happened.
Okay.
You know, whether they prepare, how they prepare to deal with the consequences, I don't know. But but as we have seen, it's not a question. I mean, look, the American establishment knew for months that this problem gonna happen. It's not like if Trump and the Republicans spill something out in the dark and catch the American establishment with the pants down. The man tell them exactly what we're going to do, basically. So they can't say they're being caught off guard. But the reality is, if a politician or a party control half of a country, in political terms, whether they like the person or not, it translates into significant political power. And you can't separate Trump behavior from his base and his base behavior from Trump. You see?
Well, one of the things, what does the event spell for America as the bastion of democracy? I mean, in the studies of political science and so on, you always read about the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, and all these things, and American democracy and whatever it means, freedom of the press and all these things. This event they've played a role in the politics of countries across the world. Zimbabwe, recently here in Guyana, we had Sarah Lynch and the other one from Canada carrying on. They stormed our political. You mentioned that Lynch came across like a tame lamb. I see the Barbadian the representative in Barbados also putting out a statement from the American representative there. But what does this event spell for America as the so-called bastion?
I think it raised the historical question, because the truth of the matter is that people have always been questioning the legitimacy of the American democratic claim, as I told you, from slavery right on through. Black people, after the end of slavery, black people didn't get the right to vote late down the road. They're killing black people for hundreds of years, police shooting your life in matter. So the American democracy has always been questioned. But because of the global strength and the global political influence, they were able to intimidate the world from interrogating the American system in a very open and public way. But this action, which came out of the internal politics and dynamics of America, exposed them for the system. But this is not to say that they're not going to recover. They're going to recover, because the American the world approach to America democracy is tied down to American global power. Many body will clap American democracy because they want the American check and they want access to the American market, they want trade and so on and so. So they will recover. But what this internal crisis has done is have revealed to them and revealed to the world that this thing you call some special democracy, it ain't special. Under certain conditions, it gonna crack like any other third world country or any other country. There's no magic in American democracy. It depends upon the amount of pressures internally, domestic pressures, and so it comes under, and they're under tremendous economic pressures. And some people argue that America is a point of possibly a revolution, regardless whether they got Trump or you got Trump. That the economic contradictions have reached a point in America that to resolve it has to lead to some fundamental change in America, which is revolutionary. And by revolutionary, it doesn't necessarily mean violent. They have to make a total overturn of the system. People, some observers are making, if they want to save America, because they reach a point where they don't have much space to do anything other than that. Robots taking away jobs from people. People getting hungry. You can't, social welfare can't feed them.
COVID-19 and all.
Well, COVID-19, I guess we can get over that.
Yeah.
We'll get over that.
Well, but
the
it has impacted
yeah, it
significantly.
made the current situation worse. But I'm saying that even when we put COVID aside, and even when they get over COVID, the fundamental challenges of the American economy reach a point, okay, that's going to create a real social upheaval in America. And some experts are arguing that America is on the fringe of a revolution. And I'm talking about Trump behavior. You know, that was something more profound.
Yeah, the economic
Yeah,
conditions,
conditions.
circumstances. Well, you know, America has had transitions in the national economy from the time of Smith, Keynesian, you know, all those.
Yeah, but you
eras
see,
of-
all those
even
periods
when
that-
Reagan came with his own different.
You see, but all those periods they'll be able to transfer,
Yeah.
they have able to transfer the misery to other people.
Mhm.
You understand? But the time things come, they can't transfer more misery to other people.
Alright, well, I like how you put it. Anyway, before we close off, I don't know, we don't have much time, but we see a threat coming from Nandalal.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Nandalal is speaking very often these days. In fact, he's speaking more than Bharat these days.
Alright,
Yeah.
to the point where people are asking where
Where's Bharat?
Where is Bharat?
Yeah.
What is wrong with him?
But I read in one of the dailies, they quote Nandalal. They said he was on some radio program, and he was making the point that his ministry and the government have already begun, you know, work on to correct the electoral loopholes that the election 2020 have exposed. Okay, but putting that aside, he made an important statement which I think the nation should not miss. Because I'm telling you, the rise of fascism and dictatorial behaviors, you know, are very often are clothed, okay, with good intentions. And people use, you know, the excuse of pursuing some higher good to introduce some decorated, some laws and legislation that, you know, it's a reflection of the lust and the abuse of power, you know. And this is what this one Nandalal is quoted as saying. Okay, this is what he's quoted as saying. Okay, let me see. We'll have it.